What if Ash started with Charmander in the ATR? We start off outside Professor Oak's lab as Ash runs in, meeting his childhood friends, Green and Gary. After a while, Professor Oak allows the group to come in. Here there is a change, as rather than there just being Squirtle and Bulbasaur, Charmander is added to the fray, because the trainer who originally got Charmander slept in, I don't know. Like in canon, Green picks first. She picks Bulbasaur, because it's green like herself. Gary picks second, he picks Squirtle, knowing that it would have an advantage over Ash's choice of Charmander. Green and Gary speed off, as Ash receives his first partner in Charmander. When Ash leaves the lab, he is greeted by his mum, who gives him his hat. Ash thanks her before going. He gets a strange feeling, as if he's being watched. Ash walks down Route 1, where he sees a Pidgey. Having a basic understanding of how catching Pokemon works, the boy sends out his Charmander. He calls for Charmander to use Scratch, and Charmander obeys, slashing the wings of the avian. The Pidgey tries to fly off. However, due to Charmander clipping her wings, the Pidgey drops out of the air. Ash throws a Pokeball, adding Pidgey to his roster. Due to Ash not yelling here, due to Charmander being obedient, the raven-haired boy neither meets Misty, which in turn means he never meets or gets beaten up by the Spearow flock. This makes Ash's path to Viridian rather uneventful. At Viridian, Ash goes to the Pokemon Center to heal up his Pidgey. However, while at his stay, the boy meets the Team Rocket trio of Jessie, James and Meowth. They try to steal all the Pokemon. However, the young spirited boy from Pallet wouldn't give up without a fight. Ash sends out his Charmander, while Jessie and James send out their Ekans and Koffing respectively. Ash, using Charmander, commands an Ember, which does major damage to Ekans. Koffing goes in for a Sludge, which blinds Charmander. Ash grabs Charmander, wiping its eyes with his shirt. Thanks to this, Charmander regains his vision, and is able to unleash a Scratch on Koffing. Koffing collides into Ekans. The duo of Pokemon are dazed. Meowth goes in for a Scratch, however Charmander sidesteps him before using another Scratch to send Meowth into the pile of Pokemon. Here the police come, and due to Charmander not blasting Jessie and James off, the trio get arrested. Ash then goes to the Viridian Forest, where he encounters a Weedle. Ash sends out Charmander, but the fire lizard seems a bit concerned over the bug stinger. So, without his starter willing to fight, Ash throws a Pokeball. Surprisingly, he is able to catch the small bug. Ash continues throughout the forest until a wild Pidgeotto attacks him. Ash sends out both his Charmander and Weedle. Immediately, Pidgeotto aims for Weedle, going for a dive bomb, but Charmander uses Ember at Pidgeotto as it descends, forcing the avian up. So the avian uses a gust which hurts both of Ash's Pokemon. Ash calls for an Ember, however due to how far Pidgeotto is, the attack does little to no damage. Pidgeotto continues on its onslaught, while Ash can't do anything. This leads to Ash's hat flying off his head. Weedle instinctively uses String Shot to catch the hat before giving it back to Ash. The raven-haired boy gets an idea, as he calls for Weedle to unleash a String Shot on Pidgeotto. This wraps Pidgeotto in a cage of silk, which causes the avian to fall. Ash calls for an Ember from Charmander. This burns the silk, which deals massive damage to Pidgeotto, but also frees it, leading to the bird flying away. Ash feels accomplished as he continues his way through the Viridian Forest. That is until he encounters a boy called Samurai. Samurai challenges the boy of Pallet to a battle. Ash accepts, as he sends out his Charmander to battle, and Weedle to watch. Samurai sends out his Pinsir. Ash calls for an Ember, which burns the bug. AJ calls for a Vice Grip, but Ash counters with Scratch. Charmander goes in for an Ember on the injured Pinsir, which knocks the bug out. Samurai then sends out his Metapod. Ash calls for an Ember, while Samurai calls out for a Harden. However, the Harden does nothing, as the forest dweller's last Pokemon gets knocked out. Weedle yells out excitedly for his friend. However, this causes a swarm of Beedrill to attack the group. Samurai and Ash split up as the group run away to save their lives. Most of the Beedrill go for Ash, so with his Charmander, he uses Smokescreen, which hides the boy and his Pokemon. However, the Alpha Beetle stays, looking for the group, and is able to locate them due to Charmander's tail flame. The bug uses Poison Sting on Charmander. The lizard takes the attack full force, which poisons the reptile. However, the vicious bee isn't done, as it goes in for a fury attack. Weedle, not wanting his best friend to get hurt because of his actions, jumps into the attack, taking the force. However, this leads to the Pokemon glowing blue as it evolves into Kakuna. Beedrill, seeing this, goes in for Kakuna. Ash noticed how Kakuna and Metapod looked somewhat similar and calls for a Harden. Kakuna executes the move, so as Beedrill attacks, it barely takes any damage. Charmander goes in for a final Ember, forcing the Apex to buzz off. Ash cheers over his victory, but Charmander faints over the exhaustion and the poison it has accumulated. Ash rushes to Pewter City with Charmander's tail flame barely burning. Ash rushes to the Pokemon Center, where he meets Nurse Joy. Ash hurries to the front desk as he gives Charmander to the nurse. Nurse Joy asks Ash if he was facing Team Rocket. This surprises the Boy of Pallet, but the nurse continues, saying that her sister in Viridian had told her about a trainer called Ash who saved the center from Team Rocket. Ash gloats about this, saying that when he enters the gym challenge, he'll be the strongest challenger of all. An old man goes up to the boy, saying that not in a million years could the boy beat Brock. This annoys Ash, who challenges the old-timer to a battle. The two go outside the Pokemon Center, getting ready for the first battle. The old-timer, who calls himself Flint, sends out a Rhyhorn, saying this is my strongest Pokemon from all my travels. Ash sends out Pidgey. Flint asks Ash if he knows Pidgey, a flying-type Pokemon, is weak to Rhyhorn, a rock-type Pokemon. Ash replies he knows, he's just proving how much stronger he is than the man and Brock. Ash takes the first attack by calling for a Gust. The attack doesn't phase the rock type. Flint laughs before calling for a Rock Throw. The attack one-shots Pidgey. Ash rushes to the Pokemon Center, handing Pidgey to Nurse Joy. Flint mocks Ash, asking how he plans to beat Brock if he can't even beat him. Ash grits his teeth. However, seeing the boy's determination, Flint tells Ash that it would be wise to catch a grass or water-type Pokemon. Hearing this advice, Ash starts running, trying to find a Pokemon that fits the description. However, after hours of looking, Ash is no closer to finding a Pokemon than before. That is until Ash feels like he's being watched. He looks at the forest, where he thinks he can make out two eyes staring at him. Ash rushes into the forest, where he sees a Tangela. Ash is about to send out Charmander, but realizes that both Charmander and Pidgey are at the Pokemon Center. With no other options, the raven-haired youth sends out his Kakuna. Kakuna goes straight in for a Poison Sting, which poisons Tangela. Tangela goes in for a bind, but Ash calls for Harden. Tangela tries to grip Kakuna, but the poison ticks in, forcing Tangela to drop the bug. Realizing it's his chance, Ash throws a Pokeball, catching the grassy gremlin. Ash rushes to the gym, where he sees Flint waiting for him. Ash is shocked and asks what the man is doing. Flint tells Ash that he wanted to see how Ash faced Brock, as Brock as a child grew up without parents, because they went on their own journeys. That's why he's as tough as a boulder. Ash gulps. Ash goes into the gym as Flint goes into the stands. Ash yells out a challenge to Brock. Brock accepts before sending out his Geodude. Ash sends out his Kakuna, who looks exhausted. Ash goes straight in for a Harden, as Brock calls for Mega Punch. The hit lands, and despite the Harden, Kakuna gets knocked out. This confuses Ash, as he knows Kakuna is stronger than that. Ash doesn't let this show, as he sends in his Tangela. However, when Tangela gets sent out, it also looks tired. And worst of all, it's poisoned. Flint scolds Ash for not going to the Pokemon Center after he caught a Pokemon. Ash decides to ignore this, calling for a Vine Whip. This does major damage to Geodude. Before Brock can respond, Ash has Tangela use another Vine Whip, which knocks out Geodude. Brock is stunned that this newbie is beating him, so he sends out his ace, Onyx. The rock snake stares down the tumble of vines, ready to squash it. However, Brook calls for a dig. Onyx, having faith in his trainer, tunnels down. Ash is confused by this until Tangela takes some damage from the poison. Brook's trying to time him out. Ash realizes. Ash is worried until he realizes something. Tangela's been stalking him since his first day, which meant it was able to go through all of Viridian Forest through the smoke screen Charmander created. Ash orders Tangela to wait until right before Onyx comes out. When Onyx resurfaces, Tangela immediately bombards the snake with tons of super effective hits. This knocks the Rocky Titan out. At the same time, Tangela succumbs to its poison, getting knocked out. Ash is about to leave empty-handed, but Brook stops him. Brook tells the boy that while he might be an idiot, the bond he has with his Pokemon is undeniable. So the gym leader hands out the Boulder Badge, saying if he could tutor the boy, he would. Here Flint comes in, revealing that he's Brook's father. Brook, learning this, bombards his father with all the chores he needs to do before leaving with Ash. Ash and Brook make their way to Mount Moon after Ash gets his Pokemon from the Pokemon Center in Pewter. Ash is already lost, looking at the cave from the outside, and tells Brook as much. Here, however, Brook tells the trainer that he knows this cave like the back of his hand, showing the boy a fossil. Ash, clueless, asks Brook what it is. Brook says it's a fossil. Ash doesn't really understand, but the duo continue. As they go inside Mount Moon, they see two Team Rocket grunts trying to capture a Clefairy. Seeing this, Ash sends out Tangela, who easily knocks the two grunts out. Clefairy, while initially timid, trusts the group due to Tangela. Because of this, Clefairy starts leading the group. However, Clefairy runs into a dead end. Ash, frustrated, punches the wall, saying he thought Clefairy knew where she was going. However, after the boy says this, the wall collapses. Brook realizes that Team Rocket must have set traps to halt their progress. The group continue. Anytime they see a wall, Ash sends out Charmander to break it. The group finds themselves at a strange place where they see 3 Team Rocket grunts and what is presumably their admin working. The group plan a surprise attack, but Ash, being Ash, almost trips, compromising the mission, as they get spotted by the grunts. Each of the grunts send out a Zubat and a Rattata, as Ash and Brook send out their Charmander and Onyx. Realizing they are severely outnumbered, they always send out all of their Pokemon for this war of attrition. Immediately, Brook's Onyx is able to crush one of the grunts' Rattata. Ash's Charmander follows by taking another grunt's Rattata out. Seeing Onyx and Charmander as the biggest threats, the grunts who lost their Rattatas call for supersonics from their Zubats. Due to Onyx being a rather large mon, it connects, getting confused. Brook immediately recalls it. The second supersonic rushes towards Charmander. However, Tangela rushes in, taking the attack. Ash is confused why the attack did nothing, and also why Brook recalled his Onyx, until the gremlin made of vines starts attacking Charmander. Ash is confused, but Brook yells at him to return Tangela. Ash does so and asks why. Brook explains that Supersonic causes confusion, and because they're already using 6 Pokemon between the two of them, there is already enough confusion. This explanation proves to be a detriment, as while the group weren't focused, Charmander gets knocked out. Ash tells Pidgey to take to the air. Pidgey flies and rushes into one of the grunts Zubat. The two have an aerial back and forth. However, in the end, both Skyborns fall. As for Brook, he does well on his part, with his Geodude taking the last Rattata out of the fight. The two grunts left call for a supersonic. One of the waves hits Geodude. However, the second doesn't meet Kakuna. Brook recalls his Geodude as the pesky bats bomb Kakuna. Ash yells for Harden, which Kakuna does, increasing its defense. After the onslaught, Kakuna cannot be seen. Ash thinks of the worst, until above them, a Beedrill uses Fury Attack on the two Zubats. Realizing she's in trouble, Matoria teleports out with her Abra. Ash and Brook are about to leave, but a Clefairy stops them. Ash is confused why Clefairy doesn't want to go with his friends. However, the fairy on one of the Pokeballs on Ash's belt. Getting caught. Ash is confused about what just happened, but he tries to leave. However, after walking on his own for a few steps, he realizes Brock wasn't following. Ash is confused, but Brock shows Ash a grey rock. Ash asks what it is, but Brock says it's a moonstone that can involve certain Pokemon, like your Clefairy. Ash asks where Brock got it, and the boy answers a Clefable gave it to him. Ash is confused why a Pokemon would just give something so precious away like that. Brock doesn't know either, as the two walk out. We cut outside the school, where Ash and Brock are walking. This is until the duo spot a random boy running on a treadmill, as other students question him. Ash and Brock yell at the kids, who all but the one on the treadmill flee. The boy introduces himself as Joe, and reveals that he was just studying with his friends. Brock isn't convinced the boys are Joe's friends, and so is Ash, who thinks they're bullies. Ash asks the boy why he's studying so hard to the point of exhaustion. The boy replies so he could enter the Kanto League. This surprises Ash, as in his beliefs, if you want to enter the league, you should travel and collect badges. Ash asks Joe who the strongest trainer in his class is. Joe pulls out a picture of a girl, however warns Ash that there's no chance he could beat her, as she's a trainer equivalent to one who has 2 badges. Actually, everyone in his class was. The newly formed trio walk into the school and find a computer. Brock asks Joe if he thinks he could beat him. Joe runs a simulation and tells Brock there's no chance a rock and ground type could beat a grass type. The two battle as Brock sends out Geodude while Joe sends out Weepinbell. Geodude with a single Mega Punch knocks out Weepinbell. This surprises Joe, but Giselle, who is watching the battle, berates Joe, saying experience trumps type advantage every day. Ash challenges Giselle to a battle. The two agree on a 2 versus 2, substitutions not allowed. Ash sends out Beedrill, while Giselle sends out Vaporeon. Vaporeon seems really nervous. Giselle calls out for a water gun, which Vaporeon does, unleashing a torrent of water. However, the attack misses. Ash tells Beedrill to dive bomb Vaporeon with a Fury attack. This lands, dealing major damage. Giselle commands Vaporeon to jump into the pool. The feline does as it's told, melting into the pool. In the pool, the evolution is able to start landing water guns. Ash tells Beedrill to use Poison Sting into the pool. Giselle snickers. However, upon seeing the grin on Ash's face, Giselle looks worried. And this is proven right when Vaporeon exits the pool, a purple blush aligning its face. Giselle calls for a blizzard, but the water type misses, allowing Beedrill to land a Twin Needle. Giselle sends out Sandshrew. Ash in turn sends out Charmander. Giselle asks Ash the intelligence of sending Charmander out when it has a type disadvantage. Ash replies saying, experience trumps type advantage every day. Both Pokemon seem nervous around the pool. Ash notices this, so starts the round off with a smokescreen. Giselle laughs, calling for a Swift. The stars hit, however Ash is the one who smiles, as Charmander, further away from the pool, unleashes a flurry of embers. Giselle tells Sandshrew to roll into a ball. Ash's smirk widens. Eventually, Sandshrew is pushed into the pool unconscious. Giselle wants to know how a trainer with 1 badge beat her. Brock tells her that trainers who travel will always have an advantage over those who don't. It's clear she doesn't understand her Pokemon that well. That final battle, Charmander versus Sandshrew, for example, both Pokemon were afraid of the pool, and Ash realised it, while Giselle didn't. The duo leave after telling Giselle this advice and enter a forest. But Giselle stops them with bags in hand, saying she's going to travel with them. Ash protests as we cut to black. Alright, and that's a wrap. I know this is very different to my usual content. However, I thought it would be fun to make. And if you enjoyed it, comment your favourite part. But don't worry, the usual uploads won't stop.